Hey friends, Ash here with Gents, and today I'm going to be doing one of those videos where I kind of just talk to you about fragrance related stuff. Today is actually more of a question, and it is, are there too many blue fragrances? And I bet most of you already have your side chosen. There's going to be a lot of you out there who say yes, absolutely, please make them stop. And then a whole bunch of you that say no, blue fragrances forever. So I'm going to talk about them a little bit and just kind of give my opinion on that. So let's jump into this discussion on blue fragrances. So, blue fragrances. At this point, it feels like there's just a blue wave just taking over all fragrances, all fragrance companies. If a fragrance company does not have its version of a blue fragrance out, it's in the working and it's gonna come out soon. That you can pretty much guarantee. Some companies are a little bit trickier about it. You have Spice Bomb Night Vision by Victor and Rolf here. Not technically a blue fragrance because it's not in a blue bottle, it's in a green and black bottle, and yet smells suspiciously similar to Paco Rabanne Invictus, which I do consider a blue fragrance. So what is a blue fragrance, I guess? Maybe we should start there. And everybody probably defines this a little bit differently. Of course, having a blue bottle or blue in the name doesn't hurt. I mean, that makes it easier to say, oh, there's a blue fragrance, I found you. But in general, blue fragrances are going to be your hyper, mass appealing, popular, compliment getting, versatile fragrances. None of what I just said is particularly negative, but blue fragrances do get a really bad rap from a lot of people in the fragrance community. A lot of times people that kind of go counterculture, right? People that are more into art, into things that push the envelope, into things that are a little bit outside the mainstream. Blue fragrances are basically the opposite of that. Blue fragrances are everything that is mainstream, which can sometimes be good, but can other times lead you to Nickelback being one of the biggest bands on earth. So mainstream does not automatically mean it's bad, but sometimes it's not good either. So yeah, a lot of these blue fragrances share a lot of similarities. They have ambroxan very often, or ambergris listed as a note. Sometimes they'll do a slight deviation from that. Instead of saying ambroxan is in the base, they'll have something like amberwood, which smells very similar to ambroxan. Very often these fragrances will have something like grapefruit in the opening, grapefruit and ginger. Occasionally throw in a little bit of incense, but it's never a really powerful incense. It's just enough to give it a little slightly interesting tweak there in the mid or the base typically. Lots of them have a salty or aquatic accord in them. When you really break it down, they're all different fragrances, but they share similarities. They're basically in the same family. So we're talking specifically fragrances like Bleu de Chanel, Yves Saint Laurent Y, the entire line of both of those. Dior Sauvage, Versace Dylan Blue, Burberry, Mr. Burberry, Invictus, Spice Bomb Night Vision, despite it not being blue. A lot of the Le Male fragrances that have come out, like Eau Fraiche or In the Navy. Fragrances like this can easily be lumped together in the blue fragrance family. And there are many, many, many fragrances that I did not bring up just now that you could lump in with all of those. And then you have fragrances like Jimmy Choo Man Blue, where they take a line that's already very mass appealing and make a blue version of that line just so they can say that they have a blue fragrance. At that point, you're being really obvious about what you're doing. So are there too many blue fragrances? Well, there are a ton. There are very many, many blue fragrances, but there's gonna be so many more in my opinion. Everybody, all of these lines want that next big hit, that really popular compliment getting fragrance that everyone talks about. And does that get boring from a collector's standpoint or somebody that's really hardcore into fragrances that keeps up with every new release? Yeah, it can definitely get boring. At the same time though, when I was younger, in my teens, my early 20s, I would have been loving all of the blue fragrances that have been coming out. Compliment getting fragrances that the ladies love, that I can wear in almost any situation, that is exactly what I would have gone for. And I still wear a lot of those blue fragrances now, despite having an enormous collection. They just work. So while sometimes it can come across a little bit boring when I see a new blue fragrance announced by whichever house doesn't have theirs out yet, and I look at the note breakdown and it's pretty much the exact same as 15 fragrances that came before it with maybe one or two minor tweaks, it can be underwhelming. You can definitely see those blue releases coming and be like, oh, here's another one. Even with Amen Ultimate, the new Mugler Amen, which as of this video is not out yet. If you're watching this in the future, then it may already be out. I was talking with Manny at Cascade Scents about that, saying how it's going to be hilarious if that is Mugler's take on Sauvage. If it has a blue fragrance opening and then it dries down to an Amen base, how funny that would be and how it would be a hit. Which you never know, that bottle is completely blue. That could be Mugler's blue fragrance. It'll be interesting to see if nothing else. I think though we just have to accept that every single house is going to come out with at least their version of a blue fragrance. Some houses with multiple versions. Even Guerlain has L'Homme Ideal Sport, which is their blue fragrance. I mean, everybody's doing it. And I know it's like your parents tell you when you're a kid, if everybody jumped off a cliff, would you jump off too? But the answer for all these fragrance companies is hell yeah, I would jump. And that's really obvious just by looking at all their releases. Do I want more interesting releases? Yes, 100%. Do I want more original releases that aren't just flankers? Absolutely. But for fragrance companies, it's cheaper just to use the exact same bottle and make a flanker and just change up the color of the bottle. Just how you end up with something like Night Vision. What does this have to do with the original Spice Bomb? Not a whole lot. You can say what you want about it, you can hate on it, you can call it derivative, you can call it boring, but to the average person, this smells great. Blue fragrances are here to stay for at least the short term. Now, I do think that fragrances in general, like pretty much all things in life, are cyclical. So what I mean by that is what's really hot today, what's selling like crazy today, that's not what's going to be always selling. If you go back to the 70s, 80s, 90s, fragrances that were enormous then when they were released, just so hot that you couldn't keep them on the shelves. If that same fragrance was released today, it would not be so hot. Take Drakkar Noir from 1982, release that today. I'm not sure how well that would be received. I'd love it though. So blue fragrances that are huge today, 10 years from now, could smell very dated, maybe even 5 years from now. Who knows what the future holds, but at some point there's going to be a release, a fragrance that drops, that changes the game again. For blue fragrances, I think it was Bleu de Chanel. Once Bleu de Chanel dropped, its popularity soared, and all the other houses started looking at Bleu de Chanel and thought to themselves, I need a version of that. But it really kicked off with Dior Sauvage. When Dior released Sauvage to compete with Bleu de Chanel, it was on. And now everybody wants a piece of that pie. Eventually though, it's going to burn out and blue fragrances won't be as big anymore. In the future, you'll have people talking about Dior Sauvage, how it was such a classic and how they just don't make them like they used to. Nowadays, you have guys saying about Dior Eau Sauvage, Dior Fahrenheit, a lot of those classic releases, saying they don't make them like they used to anymore. They used to be masculine. They used to have sophistication. They used to have an edge. They used to set you apart. They don't make fragrances like those anymore. What's gonna be funny is here in 10, 15 years, maybe less, maybe a little more, people looking back and saying, Dior Sauvage, man, they don't make them like that anymore. Dior Sauvage really set you apart. That was something interesting, unique. This new stuff, it's trash. That's just how things work. Who knows, maybe 80s powerhouse style fragrances make a comeback in 2032. All I know is that eventually there's going to come a time where blue fragrances have outworn their welcome and people just don't buy them anymore like they used to. I mean, a few years ago, we had that big oud rush where every single freaking fragrance company had to have an oud fragrance. You remember that? Everyone had to have an oud fragrance. Varvatos, Boss, Ralph Lauren, Gucci, Versace. Dior was ahead a little bit with Fahrenheit Absolute. Valentino, Armani. I mean, honestly, pretty much every single designer had an oud-based fragrance that was specifically oud, so it had oud in the name. Or they came out with a flanker and made oud the most prominent note, even if they didn't name it an oud fragrance, if they named it something different like Orient. Fragrance companies went through that oud phase. Everyone had to have their oud fragrance. And now we've moved on to blue fragrances. So maybe to a lot of the hardcore guys out there that are more interested in niche and indie, more interested in deep, rich fragrances, more interested in fragrances that come across a little more masculine, the big oud rage was more tolerable. You would just see another oud release and be like, okay. But they didn't really catch that vitriol. They didn't catch that hatred. And it's probably because oud is not as mass appealing. Blue fragrances catch much more hate because of that mass appeal. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video with music, it's like that with a lot of things. Music, once it passes a certain threshold, becomes music only for sheep if you're one of the more hardcore people. Certain movies or movie franchises are the exact same way. As long as their popularity is down here somewhere, they're not gonna catch too much hate. But once they get super popular, people that are a little counterculture again, people that are more into the finer things in life, they're gonna crap all over it. It's like that with everything. It's like that with fragrances. That's why blue fragrances get so much hate. People will call them derivative, boring, uninspired, generic, whatever. Fact of the matter is, as long as the general public, the masses of people, 95% of the population loves them, loves the way they smell, loves the versatility, the performance, loves the compliments that they garner, they're going to sell. And companies will make them because companies are in business to make money. I know, it's mind-blowing. So this has been really just kind of roundabout, but are there too many blue fragrances? If they're still being greatly anticipated by the majority of people, if they're still selling like crazy and making their companies tons of money, then no, there's not too many and there's gonna be way more to come. Do I sometimes get bored of the onslaught of new releases that are just blue flankers? Yeah, sure do. I'm hopeful that in the near future there's going to be some things announced that are truly new fragrances, not flankers, not blue releases, something new, something that changes things up. But until that fragrance does come, that changes things up, that shakes up the fragrance industry and makes everybody else take notice and makes them want to make their version of that, blue fragrances are gonna keep coming like a tidal wave. Don't get me wrong, I love some blue fragrances, and I hate some blue fragrances. Sometimes though, you're just ready for that new thing, even if you don't know yet what that new thing is. All right, guys, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. Let me know in the comments what you think about the state of the fragrance industry. What do you want to see more of? What do you want to see less of? Are you cool with all the flankers? Don't like the flankers? Cool with blue fragrances? Don't like blue fragrances? All I know is once that new thing hits, whatever that is, I'm gonna be really happy to bring it to you guys and have a conversation about that as well. See you guys.